Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Innovantage podcast, where business meets tech to bring you your competitive edge. As always, I'm your host, Max, and it is my job and duty to explore that edge between business and technology. And today we're going to be talking about a very particular piece of that edge. We're going to be talking about AI agents, what they are, where they're used, and what they're used for. And to help me on that journey is one Mr. Frank Sondors, who is the founder of Salesforge. Frank, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me. Frank Sondors, born and raised in Baltics in Latvia myself. But I've left the country at the age of 16 and went to UK, got educated there, and started my career really at Google. So in big tech, digital, and really that's where everything kind of took off. Also, arguably, also from an AI standpoint, because Google does use a lot of machine learning components within the business, and that's where I got exposed really in the early days on how machine learning can actually help you drive the business forward, not just for Google and the advertisers, but also later down the road working for a bunch of other SaaS companies. So then I worked for SimilarWeb, big data, competitive intelligence, and then I moved over to working actually for a machine learning company, the old AI. So machine learning exists from 1950s. That's how old machine learning is, or you could call it AI is, the older form of machine learning. And back in that company, BlackRock, so they're based in New York, we used to predict real-time conversion intent on a website. Typically, this would be like a D2C brand. So let's say a user lands on anywhere on the website, doesn't matter whether you draw that user from Google Ads or from organic, whatever. You could literally predict in real time based on 400 non-PII signals that you can crunch within 10 milliseconds. What is the probability? So what's the propensity that you would actually buy something on this website? And you would score that user from 1 to 10. And then you would apply that data within Google Ads. So for example, you could do retargeting based on a particular score, etc., rather than using what's called rules-based segmentation. So rules-based means if the user was on my cart page, I want to retarget all of those users. So this is like what we call the old school way of doing marketing. The new school of doing marketing is that you're just predicting wherever the user is on the website, let's retarget them, and then let's try and predict the propensity. Then I moved over to work for a company called Watergraph, led a sales team of 50. And that's where I realized that actually when it comes to scaling companies, back in the days was growth at all costs. So scaling companies was just plowing more headcount, so more bodies into the equation in order to attain your targets. And I thought that was a really wrong way to look at things. Why would you want to have all those individuals in the business? Because naturally in sales there's a huge attrition problem. Essentially people come and go, and I always say that for every 10 salespeople that you hire, only one person maybe is a natural. 2 to 3 people can be trained up, and maybe about around 60% is really what's called deadwood. So meaning people come from all walks of life into sales, but they're not really born to be in sales. They don't want to really be in that role. They don't really enjoy that job. Only about 40% of the whole sales population is really there and doing a great job and being accretive to the business. So from that kind of pain point that I had as a VP sales, I thought to myself, there must be a better way to acquire pipeline. And this is where I started a company called Salesforge less than 2 years ago. And I started with my 2 co-founders that I met through YC matchmaking platform. And we're really right now on a mission where we have a vision where we are helping companies to acquire sales pipeline, but with the least headcount possible, and doing so what we call with the highest probability using big data behind the scenes. So to do that, one of the things that we're doing naturally to reduce headcount is spinning up what we call agentic capabilities within the software to kill the repetitive tasks that humans do. And then the AI agent can do a job much better than an average rep can do. Arguably, an AI agent cannot outperform the top salespeople out there in the world, but they can definitely outperform the averages that are in the team, which is typically a majority of the individuals in your team. But what I'm a big believer in is that we're not just reducing, we're not about reducing headcount necessarily, but we are about blending agentic capabilities with the best sales reps out there, so that the 40% of the individuals that are in the team can produce significantly more output, right, to help you to attain the target, and that would help us to then reduce the 60%, right, so the deadwood down to as close to 0% as possible. That's really what we're trying to do in our business.
Okay. Sounds like a very logical next step in your overall career, and it sounds like a very nice time to do that. Because I definitely agree in terms of sales. I have hired many salespeople over the years, and the statistic does sound true. Like, I would say that only 40% out of those had the potential to become, you know, naturally born salespeople that outperform the mean and the average, and most of them are deadwoods in one way or the other. Without, I'm not trying to badmouth anybody. It's just that there is a particular skill set that is required and a particular mindset that is required alongside with that skill set. And sometimes one of those is out of sync. Sometimes you have great skills, but your mindset is not there. You may be too tired, or you may be in the wrong industry, or you may be not really believing in what you're selling, and so on and so forth. Or, the other way around, yeah, where you might be a great believer in something, but you don't really have the skills to understand the complexity of the environment that you're in, which is something that I see a lot, for example, in people coming in from, like furniture sales into tech sales. Like, yeah, you have the skills to sell stuff, but tech works in a little bit of a different type of manner. You have to do your different ICP, your pipeline works differently. You have like different, well, areas of the enterprise and the business that you have to interact with daily rather than what you're used to. And that all takes just time and effort to develop. Some succeed, some just get discouraged by the high skill ceiling that is required and go away. So I am on board. AI agents sound great. What the hell they even are? Tell me.
So an AI agent is so just like the 40% of the individuals that I would maybe the better let's start maybe with humans. So the way we typically hire humans is we typically say we are hiring what we call autonomous humans within our business, as an example, and then that kind of correlates quite well to what AI agents are. Essentially, an autonomous human, when you hire that into the business, is a human that can own the turf within your business. So that turf, for example, if you're doing sales for a company, you're really owning that sales component within the business, right? So nobody's there to oversee you. You really need to figure out how to do X, Y, Z, whether that's building pipeline, whether that's closing deals, and many other things. And then I'm just there to sort of to coach you, to provide you the knowledge on how to do various sort of things. But I'm not there to babysit you. And that's ultimately what an AI agent is. An AI agent essentially has a task or a goal in mind to achieve. So, for example, if we use AI agent for a particular part of the business to say reply to a prospect, then the AI agent would use a particular context that it can work with. So, for example, this could be a sales playbook, right? That you can say, give it to the AI agent as a context. So you could give it like, what's the information on pricing? What are the FAQs of what are the frequently asked questions? So you feed that into the AI agent, and then you tell the AI agent, hey, listen, once we get a reply from our prospect, we want to give them the best possible reply to the prospect, right? To get us to the next stage. So the next stage could be, for example, is that micro conversion that you're looking in the funnel, which is essentially a meeting booked, right? So you could say, AI agent, please, we need a meeting to be booked with this prospect. So whenever they're coming, whenever they're replying to us, then this is the context. Please work with that, and please try and get them booked into a call, right? So. So unlike something like the old school stuff being, say, a chatbot uses predefined sort of rules, right, that it kind of has to work with. But an AI agent does what's called reasoning. So when as I said, when a reply does come to you, and you have to kind of work with that reply, this is only the context that you can work with to then reply back to the prospect and then drive towards a macro conversion being meeting booked.
Mm-hmm. So how does that then work? You mentioned that ideally you want to enhance the performance of your top performers, and micro conversions in the funnel you focus on with AI agents. Where do you draw the line? How does the ideal setup look like? Where do humans start and AI begin? Is there a specific line that people need to cross, or it is always very enterprise specific?
Good question. So AI agents can be used in different shapes and forms. Let's take, for example, a large organization where you may have, say, 50 salespeople, as an example. So quite a larger org. So there, typically, when you hire salespeople, and when you look at unit economics, you say, okay, we're going to be going and hunting these particular accounts, right? Because they're worth our time, the deal sizes are big enough, right? The sales cycles make sense and all that stuff. But then there's a lot of the lot of other accounts where it doesn't make really sense maybe to apply a sales rep. because naturally the deal size maybe they are so small. So it could be like, say, SMB accounts, right? So there's like thousands of them,
Yeah.
but there's no point going after the SMB accounts because it's just too expensive to be acquiring the SMBs, right? Because why would you spend all your time on the SMBs when you could be spending, say, on enterprise deals, right, or key accounts essentially? So this is where this is a fantastic use case to use AI agents in tandem when you are prospecting into bigger accounts to say, okay, AI agents, please do reach out to these accounts, say via email or via LinkedIn, and do engage with them with exactly the same value prop that we're having, maybe slightly differently sort of optimized towards SMBs. And let's try and also get potentially either meetings, if you can handle those, right? So if you can handle extra meetings, or you can tell the agent, okay, the agent, we don't want meetings with SMB accounts. We want to drive these SMBs into a particular section on our website. So this is what's called a click out event that you can set as a conversion for the AI agent. So nowadays you can do that, but you can do that also in a bunch of other softwares. You say the goal here is that the user clicks out onto this section of the site, and then they would progress through the funnel onto the site, right? So it's something that you can also set up. And that's just an example of where you could kind of blend your existing activity together with the AI agents, because they would just essentially go after different segment of the TAM.
Yeah.
Now, the other example would be, let's say we work with a lot of smaller companies, let's say less than 10 employees, and a lot of those, say, founders are not really good at prospecting, right? Or maybe they don't have the time because it's just fully slammed, but they still need to generate the pipeline, right? Because I always say in the startup, there's only two things you need to do. You need to build a great service or a great product. And then number two is you need to sell a lot of that, right? So, and then the founders really are too busy working with existing customers or building a great product, but they forget that you need to consistently build pipe, because if you're not going to do that, you may potentially die. So, so either you do it yourself. So there's three options essentially in the market. Either you do it yourself if you have the time and if you have the expertise, do it, or you can learn that. Number two is you hire an agency that's really good at this, right? So they work with a bunch of different customers, and then they could do that for you, but it's quite an expensive route. And then the third one, which is the one that's trending right now, is the AI agent route, right? You just set up within the software an AI agent, and it goes and does the prospecting for you, and you're just waiting for the meetings to be booked in your calendar. Now, most of the times when a company with less than 10 employees comes to us, they typically either are not knowledgeable on how to build pipeline or just don't have the time, right? So this is a fantastic opportunity to spin up an AI agent, and it's also the cheapest option out of the three, essentially, because hiring a human and training them is very expensive, right? If you decide to do that, or you as a founder, of course, you could do that as well, but your time is also worth a lot of money. The agencies are also expensive, but the AI agents actually arguably right now in the market is the cheapest form of trying to acquire a customer. So every path has its risks, right, to go down with. But my argument is that the AI agent path is the lowest risk to go down.
Sounds like an ideal situation, ideal scenario where there is no downside to implementing an AI agent. It's fast, it's cheap, it does what you need it to do. But I'm guessing that's not the case. I'm guessing there are some downsides to AI agents. And what could those be?
There's a bunch of downsides. I mean, just generally to an agent. So, I mean, it's not just about maybe an agent, but let's say if we take an example in our case, right? So we are in a space where we're prospecting, we're reaching out to prospects cold, right?
Yeah.
So trying to acquire, trying to book demos, and trying to close those prospects, right? And whether you use the humans or use an agency or use AI agent is the same. You're reaching out to prospects, right? You're going to just do it slightly differently. But in a lot of cases, when a smaller business, for example, comes to us, in many cases, actually, they don't have actually even a product market fit. And then they try to do the prospecting. So yes, it doesn't matter what you're going to use, an AI agent or not, you will fail in a lot of cases. And then the second thing is, even though you do have product market fit, you don't have what's called a channel fit. So in a lot of cases, you have a great product, you're solving a great problem, and yes, you already have a lot of customers, but when it comes to reaching out cold to your prospects, it just does not work via email, right, or via LinkedIn, etc. It's just not the channel of how that actually can consistently work and for you, where you can consistently acquire pipeline. So again, it doesn't matter really what you use; it's just not going to be the channel. And there are many businesses where you need to acquire customers through other channels. It's just that it's not going to be this one, right? And the way that you look at the AI agents is it's just like a bit like Google Ads, for example, right? So I spend money in Google Ads, a bunch of other companies spend money in Google Ads. Let's say you're going to spend €1,000 into Google Ads, and you want to see whether you're getting conversions or not.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, the answer will be no. So Google churns customers, and the same with us, right? Because it's just an acquisition channel. So you're putting some money behind this, trying to see whether the agent can bring for you conversions. And if it doesn't, yes, you end up churning with the customer. So in our case, we do also have a kind of considerable churn because we're just trying to learn ourselves, because AI agents essentially exist for about a year or so. We're trying to learn in which cases does the AI agent work or not, in which industries, how big should be the deal size, what are the kind of various components. And there's about, right now we're looking about sort of 10 different variables, right? When we're saying this is ICP yes or this is ICP no, right? So, but yeah, I can definitely tell you it doesn't work for everybody. And neither has to be honest. Like, this is where qualification just generally comes in. So yeah, that's the maybe one thing that even though you're gonna go down the AI agent route, it's not gonna work necessarily for you. But it's a great test to run, and a lot of businesses currently are hungry to run these tests to figure out whether it actually can work for them or not. Whether that's something that they do for the first time or to supplement the current acquisition process. But the other things naturally with the AI agents is that they don't also always work from a standpoint of, let's say, if we're tasking the AI agent to compute a great email, then depending on the agent, depending on the orchestration of the agent, etc., you may not be actually generating really great emails. You can see that essentially the AI generated, right? So
Yeah.
to get essentially an email not to look like that it's AI generated, it's a very hard work. A lot of prompting that has to go into that, and many other things that, like context also, that you need to provide into the agent as well.
Yeah.
How can you compute essentially emails that they're actually indistinguishable from a human? That's a very, very difficult piece of job that needs to be done from a sort of engineering standpoint, orchestration standpoint, etc. And because you can assemble a lot of these AI agents also through these what's called automation workflow tools like N8N or Make.com, etc., where you can also build a bunch of these AI agents. But the dilemma is, if you're going to be sending a piece of message through any channel that will look like it's AI generated, then yes, the probability that the other individual will respond back to you is relatively low, right? Because already today, a lot of people have a fatigue with AI generated content, essentially. So you have to be careful on the content front, where you definitely want to sort of review these messages before they go out, whether you would look at them, or maybe send it to your girlfriend or your mom. It doesn't matter. Send it to somebody, or quite a few people, and say, hey, do you think this was sent by me or not? Just ask that question. Because see, like in my case, when I show what we do to a lot of my customers that are very savvy, they say, Frank, I can see it's AI generated. And I say, yes, because you've seen a lot of this stuff, but most people out there still have not seen a lot of the AI generated emails, right? They don't know whether this is actually AI generated or not, a lot of them, right? So the best way to kind of validate whether, when you're computing, if your emails and you're maybe talking about your business or whatever else you're doing, just send it to a few people in your industry, send it to people that have no idea about your business. And again, this could be your friends, again, relatives, etc., and just ask whether it looks AI generated or not. Actually, no, that's maybe the wrong question. Actually ask whether they think it was actually sent by you, whether that email was sent by you or not. That's just an example, right? So that you could do.
Well, emails are an interesting example, I feel, because again, from my experience, even before AI stuff, when you were training people up, you basically had to train them to write emails. Surprisingly, I don't know how your experience answers this or no, but in my experience, a lot of people don't know how to write emails. Like, whatever they try and write, it sounds unnatural, it sounds robotic, it sounds just bad. You need to spend a lot of time teaching people how to write an authentic email that can be read as if it was written by a human. So it's not just an AI specific problem. It's just generally it's hard to do. And a lot of the sales processes that I have been exposed to have been built on the idea that it's not that important how you write it, because again, it's very hard to write a human email. It's very hard to have that context that is necessary, regardless whether or not you feed that context to an AI or if you feed that context to a human. You still need that context and you use that context. And if you spend too much time getting that context and implementing that context, then one email becomes too expensive to send out, and then you lose the whole point. So you just fight against the channel itself, how to make email deliverability better, or open rates better, or just the volumes higher rather than the quality of the email itself higher. So would you say that AI agents address that in a way where you can still do high volumes like email sends, but make the overall quality of those emails a bit higher? Or is it the other way around where you can focus on, on particular targets in your ICP? So just make your ICPs more targeted, make them narrower, and have specific campaigns running towards those ICPs where just the volume of that variability is so high that no sales team would ever be able to support it, just because of the limitations of our human brains. Or am I overthinking it in the end? You just have to send out emails and don't think about it too much.
So when it comes to success, let's say in the world of sales, so I always say there's these what's called core four pillars, where success lies. Pillar one is using some sort of a software that can actually send out emails in a way that land in the primary more often than not. Right? There's a lot of softwares actually that are very good at that. Some softwares are not good at that. So that's pillar one. Using what's called an execution layer. That's really great from a deliverability standpoint. Then it doesn't matter whether you apply AI agent. That's kind of what's called modus operandi, right? So whether you use a human or AI agent just helps you to scale up or do things faster and cheaper, etc. Then the number two is really around what's called email infrastructure. So that really helps to improve deliverability. I'm not going to go too much into that. Number three is what's called the copy. So this is particularly the part which is very important. So to craft a really good email, it probably takes about 10 to 15 minutes. Why does it take that long? Well, if you're a sales rep, and I used to be actually a frontline sales rep for a lot of companies, what would you do? Well, I go and look on LinkedIn. I go and read through the profile of that individual. I go and look on the website. I go and look on somewhere else on Google. I'm going to try and find some information about this company, and then I'm going to try and figure out how can I position sort of my product in the best possible light for that particular individual in the company. And it takes a lot of time to write a really great email. And this is when you feel very sad when there's no response. You spend all that time crafting the email, and then suddenly there's no response from the prospect. And guess what? It happens for majority of the time, 90+% that people will just not respond to you for different reasons. Whether they don't have the timing is off. So in a lot of cases, the timing is really off when you're reaching out to people, and no solution can help you. That need an AI agent, etc. And what I mean by that is at any given time when you're selling something in the market, there's only about 2 to 3% of the potential buyers who are in market for what is it that you're selling, right? You just don't know who they are, which is the reason why you end up essentially scaling your activity to try and figure out who those 2-3% of individuals are actually, that way you can kind of position your product in the best possible way, convert, etc., and kind of down the funnel. So pillar three, the copy is very, very important, like crafting these unique emails, what we call to every single individual. And because it takes so long of a time, this is where an AI agent is very powerful. Any form of sort of automation is very powerful to kind of help solve what we call the copy pillar. And the best way that I always say that you can solve that is when you combine these two sets of data that goes into an email. Data set number one is what we call the seller data. So what is it that we know about you, your business? What is the pain point that you're solving? What's the solution that you have on offer? What's the cost of what's called inaction? If the prospect's not going to do anything about this problem, the idea is that's going to cost them more than implementing the solution, right? So it's these sort of sets of data or essentially a value prop. And you can have multiple value props for different buyer personas. So that's seller data. And then you have to combine the seller data with what's called the buyer data. What do we know about each and every individual, right? So when you combine these two data sets together, this is when you can compute on top of that, right? It doesn't matter which LLM you're using, whether that's GPT, Claude, etc., and you can play around with that. So typically today, Claude, I would say, has the best, essentially is the best LLM for computing emails. But you can kind of test, the technology is evolving so fast that probably in 3 months' time, DeepSeek maybe would be the best. Doesn't matter which LLM. But copy is very, very important. And whether you figure out through an automation how to do that or use an AI agent to do that, it doesn't really matter. But as long as you're crafting what we call a unique email to every single recipient in their native mother tongue, that's really the best form of an email. So I'm going to give you an example how it works is, let's say, in Europe. So if in Europe, let's take a market like France, for example. If we're going to send emails, even though they're unique in English to French people, guess what? It's going to backfire, and people may swear back to you and say, how dare you writing to me in English, right? So even language matters a lot, which can easily 2x your reply rate just by switching from English into the native mother tongue of the recipient. Now, a lot of people will not speak the lingo, like the local lingo. But guess what? AI does speak any language of your choice, well, at least like top 50 languages in the world. It does speak quite well, actually. The smaller ones, this is where it struggles with. But let's say if you would compute the email in French, so it's a test that I have run personally, then guess what? Then the reply rate goes through the roof. Now, the dilemma is I can send that email in French to the prospect, but the problem is that the French prospect wants to talk to me in French on the demo. And that's where you have a problem essentially, right?
Yeah.
So then they feel like let down, and they feel like you have sort of misled them that you can speak French, but you actually can't speak French, right?
Yeah.
So this is where it doesn't yet, I guess, click in the, I think, overall sales funnel. So if you're trying to increase conversion rates somewhere in the beginning by implementing, by crafting a unique email in French, etc., you also need a rep that actually speaks French in order to close that deal potentially. So it's things like that. And I cannot actually imagine that an AI agent will actually jump on a call with the prospect today. Reason being is because humans like to buy from other humans, right? So you like to have a conversation like we're having right now. And so they would jump on a call, have a conversation, and then they buy. Because at the end of the day, people buy from people, even though you're representing a particular company. I like you, I like the product that you're selling, and hence I'm willing to pay, I don't know, 10,000 euros, to get that product. But what is really struggling is that beginning the first part of the sales process, like generating the demand, right? This is where AI agents are super, super powerful, I would say. The only thing I can imagine, why would a human jump on a call with an AI agent rather than a human, is where you from the get-go you would say, we're gonna give you 20% off from the rate card, so from the price. Do you know why it's 20%?
Why?
Because sales costs 20% typically. Yes. So
Ah.
if you don't doing your maths and you know everything about your numbers in your business, sales should cost about 20% of the revenue. So if you're from the get-go saying to the customer, hey, I'm gonna give you 20% from the rate card, doesn't matter what the price is, that's how much typically the sales rep is costing your organization. And this is the only time I can imagine a human jumping on a call with an agent and having a proper conversation back and forth. Now, the reason why some humans would still want to talk to an agent rather than to a human is because a lot of buyers had a really bad experience with sellers. So there's a lot of, as I said, the 60% that would, right? So there's a lot of bad salespeople that buyers were exposed to, and they just have this, it's not something that you can kind of get rid of. Essentially, they have this bad experience, and because they had this bad experience, they'd rather talk to an agent essentially through the whole sales funnels, right? And if you just we give a discount of 20%, it's a nice cherry on top essentially. So yeah. So this is kind of on the copy part, and why copy does play a huge role, not just from a standpoint of kind of driving pipe, but also from, like you mentioned, there's this what's called email deliverability component. So one of the things that people definitely disregard in the space, hey, I want to use the AI agent to craft really great emails and all that stuff. But if your emails are actually landing in spam, then you that's much bigger problem, right? Because it doesn't matter how great the email is or how great your targeting is, but what you really need to solve is the first problem really in the world of sales, let's say specifically in email, and that's the deliverability problem. Now, the final thing I just want to mention, the success pillar 4. So first one was execution layer, then infrastructure layer, then copy layer, right? So, and then the final one is the targeting. So it doesn't matter how great my infrastructure is, doesn't matter which software I'm using, and then I'll have the best copy. But if I'm targeting the wrong people, then nothing will happen, right? So then everything will go down the drain. So I think the hardest problem to solve today, and AI agents can't really solve that, I think, yet really well. This is where I think we're going into this world of AI agents solving the targeting problem, like this year really, is like really figuring out actually what people do today. So people go into some sort of random database in the world, and they would pull a list of let's say 1,000 prospects that they want to reach out to. Now, typically, the next step after you pull the list of 1,000 prospects, even though you selected all the right filters, etc., is to actually qualify each lead one by one based on X parameters, right? So variables that you have in your head that this is my ICP. And this is something typically that the human, or the SDR, or another role there's as well, that used to do this manually. But again, it takes a lot of time. But if you're actually going to qualify each and every prospect, and you're only going to send an email to the right prospects, overall, naturally, your results conversion rates will be much better because you eliminated the noise from the list, right? So this is something that we're gonna see a major value coming from AI agents this year in particular. And if we're not gonna do that, right? If we're not gonna clean essentially our list through AI agents, essentially cleaning lists through humans is too expensive. Is problem one. Plus, there's human error naturally. So, but personally, myself, I rather trust an AI agent to qualify my list than trusting a human to qualify my list. Because I said there's a human error. You kind of have to think about it. Even if I'm going to train a human is more likely to make a mistake than an AI agent on something like list qualification, right? So I always think about this, what are called error rates. Is an AI agent more likely to make an error, or is the human more likely to make an error for this particular task that I have in my business? So yeah, this is going to be the biggest lift. So if you're able to use AI agents for list qualification, you should definitely do that, and I highly recommend. And there's a bunch of also solutions popping up out there in the market today that can help you with that sort of task.
Okay, that makes sense. That does make sense to my mind. And we've talked a bit about off camera. We've talked about the high volume, high performance sales versus the long form, big enterprise sales, and how it requires a bit of a different mindset and a bit different skill set to excel at those two different types of sales. When it comes to AI agents, what do you feel? Where would they excel better in terms of high volume, high performance, but low revenue clients when it comes to high velocity sales? Or is it more so targeted at optimizing specific places in a long funnel when we're working with enterprises?
That's a good question. If you would draw this sort of four quadrants around sort of two axes essentially around your sort of deal sizes and sales cycle length, essentially, the longer the sales cycle, the bigger the deal size, the less likely you are use a fully autonomous AI agent, and the more likely you are using what's called a co-pilot. Essentially, you are an enterprise sales rep, you're a very expensive sales rep, but you're going to use these sort of co-pilots to help you to fill out, let's say, CRM notes and many other things, right? So you definitely, you're more likely using co-pilots because, still in a lot of sort of enterprise environments, people are still skeptical about AI agents because naturally, if an AI agent makes an error, who's there to blame, for that particular, mishap? Is it the revenue operations manager? Who is that? Now, so definitely it's much trickier. The bigger deal sizes, the longer the sales cycles, right? So this is where I think the value of fully autonomous agents is not there yet today, but it's going to be there, I believe, in about a year or two. Now, where do we see a lot of value from AI agents is actually where the sales cycles are very short, typically 2 to 4 weeks. And the deal sizes will be below 10K ACV, so annual contract value. This is where actually AI agents are super powerful. So that means also that you typically need to have a huge TAM. Actually, one thing that I didn't say, the huge TAM. So that means total addressable market. So you need to have thousands and thousands and thousands of potential prospects that you could be reaching out to. So for example, in my case, I run a business and I have millions of potential businesses that I could reach out to about my particular product.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing is I would spin up the agent, so called Agent Frank. I would spin up Agent Frank to go after the smaller fish, and it's called the wide net approach. You're going wide, right? But I cannot, I cannot be responding to each and one of them, right? So, and I would then let the agent loose, essentially do the prospecting, actually book meetings for me. And typically what happens is that on a daily basis, if I run the agent, it books me about like 1 or 2 demos for me while I'm talking to you right now, right? So it's a nice feeling that while I'm doing something, the agent books meetings for me and it responds to prospects literally within minutes when I get the reply back, right? So that's really interesting sort of, I guess, feeling that a lot of business owners really having these days. And I speak to a lot of business owners just generally, across the world, US, etc. And there's a lot of people that just hate the idea of hiring humans today. Just really hate the idea because of all the babysitting they have to do, especially with humans, training them, etc. They rather want to figure out, this way. How could I actually hire a bunch of AI agents and let them do this particular task while I'm doing something else, like super important, right? Being on a podcast, whatever that is, right? So, but then what I will do, right, after this show, I will go back to my office and I will go and do not the white hat approach, but the spearhead approach, which means, yes, I'm not going to use the agents for that. I was essentially going to go after what I would describe top 100 accounts with the highest deal value. Yeah, so I'm personally not comfortable even using my own agent for the top accounts yet. So, which is where I described to you, large deal sizes, long sales cycles. That's where you're still likely to use the human, right? But the widened approach, definitely AI agent. This is where it's very, very powerful. Now, the spearhead approach. I'm not going to go too much into that on the spearhead approach, but essentially it just means you're doing a lot more sort of multi-threading. You're doing a lot more multi-channel. You're trying to meet these peoples in offline events, which naturally an AI agent can't do.
Yet.
Yes, yes. Elon Musk naturally is building, those robots, right? That we all seen. I'm always making a joke. What if we could install Agent Frank into Elon Musk's, robots and let them go into these offline events? That's what I think we're going to see in the future. But to give you an idea about performance of an AI agent. So if an AI agent would, let's say my segment, right? So I'm reaching out to a lot of businesses, a lot of salespeople. What is the performance? So we're typically seeing about 2% to 2.5% reply rate on average.
Yeah.
And then within that, so within those replies, let's say we get 10 replies, 1 or 2 out of 10 are positive. This is the typical unit economics. So if we're able to get 10 to 20% positive reply rates from 2%, 2.5% reply rate we're getting, from a unit economic standpoint, it actually works really well for me with the deal size. It's very, very what's called CAC efficient approach. From cost of customer acquisition, even though I'm paying a lot for the agent and to process every email and to do the scraping and a bunch of other things to have the right context, the unit economics works really, really well for these what's called small accounts, the SMB accounts, right? And as long as it works for the business, right? So it works for me. Naturally, I'm looking to accelerate and scale that up, especially if I have a huge TAM. Now, as I mentioned, there's a bunch of examples where the AI agent doesn't work at all, right? So the reply rate is 0, and that can also happen in our business. The reply rate is 0, but that's because as I said, typically the main problem that we're seeing is just don't have a channel fit. So this customer has never run even any form of acquisition via email in the past, and we're running as a test, and then we're realizing it's actually not working out. It doesn't matter what we change, whether that's the context change or the targeting change, it just doesn't work. Right? And then you come back, to a conclusion with a customer that this is most likely not the right channel fit for you. And that's a typical kind of outcome when a customer is churning with us that we're getting to. And that's the feedback, because we always get feedback from the customers why they're churning, right? Because we apply always for every agent relationship a human on top of it from our end. And we always set up this what we call mutual Slack channel. And the reason why we're doing it, even though the agent is fully autonomous, is because 99% of companies in the world still have not used any form of an agent, right? So it's like the internet moment. Okay, the agent's like super powerful, but a business typically doesn't know how to use it, right? Even though there's all the instructions and tool tips and blah, blah, blah. That's why you need a human on our end, which is running like hundreds of agents, right? Across hundreds of customers. And then we just apply and kind of share that knowledge with you. And so we're trying to drive the success, and we're trying to figure out how do we get to a stage where any business can just spin up an agent. Because in our case, actually, it's not very profitable to have that human looking after the relationship. We are what we call in the PLG business, so product-led growth. We need to figure out how can a human click on a few buttons and spin up an agent, and off they go. And it's very, very challenging, right? So this is why we apply a human right now. We're trying to learn where is the typical business stuck in, which part of the process, what happens when they don't see the results, what should be the next step, how could we automate that. So automation is really the end result, and the AI agent is the means to that end result potentially, right? So, and then what we're doing as a business right now, we're trying to spin up these different agents, or what I'll describe swarm of agents, to help the customer be successful. That's really the next evolution of AI agents. So last year we've seen a lot of what's called these AI agents, which are designed for one task. But as we progress into this year, we're going into this next stage of AI agents, which is what's called swarm of agents. So that means multiple agents working together as a team, which is essentially the solution to your problem. Because one agent, unfortunately, will not be enough to solve the whole problem for you as a business. You need to create this swarm of agents where again in the sales process it may be this agent does this thing, that agent does that thing. So think of this as like an SDR team, right? So sales development rep, this person will do this thing, that person will do that thing, etc. And overall, this is how you're maximizing the output. And this is really where we are headed, I think, as a AI agent, let's call it economy. So.
Mhm. So, agents become groups, become swarms, become just an endless stream of AI that basically does your business for you. And we've been focusing today a lot on sales, but I'm guessing AI agents can be applied to different parts of the business as well. Think recruiting, which has a lot of similar processes to sales that just seems natural. Then process building and maintenance of those processes, process optimization, like who can do that better than an AI to just come in and analyze and build a process surrounding that. And I'm guessing like every faucet of any given business can and probably will at some point be at least partially outsourced to an AI. So that brings me to a simple question. So are we just optimizing ourselves out of the business? Will anybody remain in a business in the end? How do you see the vision of the future?
That's a very good question. So this is actually what we're doing literally today at Salesforge. So even though we haven't been in business for even 2 years, what has happened in the pretty much last 12 months is we have scaled from $0 to $3 million in ARR. There were 3 co-founders 12 months ago. So only 3 co-founders. Now we have 40 people. So we scaled massively.
Yeah.
And then this is where back of my mind is like, damn, we have all these humans. It's horrible. I would say it's horrible. Like, think about it.
I hope none of your employees are listening to this podcast because they might feel anxious about their jobs right now, but please continue.
No, so naturally, every business has these sort of repetitive processes, right? So we talked about sales as one example, but guess what? The same AI agents can be used across different parts of the business: finance, HR, recruiting, you name it, right? So, and I think the smartest businesses and what I would describe the top 1%, creme de la creme businesses, will be the ones that will be implementing AI agents across their whole business operations. So we do that as well. So we started to aggressively do that, particularly in January, where we have implemented this, what we call automation software called N8N, which is essentially a workflow tool. So if somebody's familiar with Zapier as an example, so the Zapier is like, fantastic tool, but there's few problems that it's not advanced enough for what we're looking for. Like, we need to spin up a bunch of AI agents. We need to be coding. We need to be doing.
I would ask you to explain what Zapier is for those of us that are not familiar with it, because, in the sales context, many people do know what the hell that is, but outside of it, many people do not.
Yeah, so Zapier is a company based in San Francisco. Essentially, it allows you to connect 2 different softwares and automate sort of piece of data. Let's say, pass this data from this software to that software. If this happens, do that, and so on and so forth. And it's a fantastic automation tool, but it's quite pricey, first of all. And it's not as advanced as you want it to be. Like, I want to spin up a bunch of agents within the automation workflows. I want to code within that, etc. And it's a nice tool, like an entry tool, what's called, right? And you use Zapier. So we, for example, integrate with Zapier, right? Because, let's say if a customer receives a reply, we want to push that piece of reply, that piece of data back into the CRM, like Salesforce or HubSpot, etc.
Yeah.
This is when you would use, say, Zapier, right? Because you needed something to happen between typically 2 softwares. But the world has massively changed over the last 10 years. And so you have this a new tool that came out called Make.com. Their former name was Integromat. And then really the final tool, we would describe V2.0 of Zapier, is really what's called N8N. It's a horrible name, actually. I don't know why. I always have a hard time to pronounce it. N8N. So
N8N.
Yes.
N8N.
Yes.
It's weird.
It's a weird one, yes. But so we because you have to figure out what will be the base, what will be the main software on which you will build all those beautiful automations, where you will hook up AI agents and LLMs, and where you're going to do coding and many other things. So you have to figure out what's the backbone of your business, right? Because the backbone of your business cannot be the operations team, arguably. It should be N8N, right? Because N8N runs 24/7. If something is broken, it will inform you. If something's going really well, it will inform you. So and you can spin up, as I said, a bunch of AI agents, etc. So what we've decided in our revenue operations team and operations team, that we need to figure out ways how we scale without adding all those bodies essentially within our team. So N8N is one of those things that needs to happen, right? So you need to implement that within your business so you can increase output levels and not scale headcount. Very important, because otherwise you will end up doing layoffs at some point in the future, right? Which is a lot of companies do. And I can tell you, I speak to also a lot of VCs. They're typically excited about businesses that scale in terms of revenue, but the headcount is literally really flat. So how can you achieve that? So one of the things is doing something like this. So then we, as a company, we have a goal to implement 1,000 N8N flows this year. So that means on a weekly basis, we have to be shipping, like 10, 20 flows at least to get to our goal of 1,000 flows by end of 2025. And everybody in the business is responsible to propose what is the automation workflow that they would like to see in order to essentially kill that repetitive process that happens. And it could be anything. It could be like a very little thing. But if that's a little thing that you do on a daily basis and it consumes you like 10 minutes to do that, we should kill it, right? The idea is that humans do fewer and fewer things, and you feel like that this is a machine that you're working in. And that's the feeling I had back in my days at Google. Everything is automated at Google. And it's that fantastic feeling that this machine just runs, and you as a human, you're just face of the machine. It's amazing, that feeling. And that's exactly the feeling that I would like to recreate also in Salesforge, where it feels like you come into the business and it just runs and it will kill like a bunch of kind of manual tasks, and you're really doing something that's of real value where only human can intervene. And this is how we also think about hiring, actually. So whenever, for example, we have a big pain point in the business, right? A lot of businesses think, let me hire an individual to solve that pain point. But that's very old school, is my take. The first thing you should do is like, okay, if I have a pain point, can I take in what's called an off-the-shelf AI agent solution in the market? So that means it's a piece of software or an AI agent, you plug it in and you solve that problem super fast, right? If you cannot do that, then our second thought process, okay, if you cannot buy an AI agent to solve this problem, how about we build a flow in N8N, to solve that problem in a particular way? And if that fails, then the next step is like agency, because naturally hiring humans. The problem with humans as well, in hiring them into the business, especially in our business, finding really high quality labor today, when you have a lot of other kind of SaaS companies out there, you're essentially competing, right? So we're in what's called talent war. There's a war zone happening out there. It's a different type of war zone. The war zone is like you're fighting for the best talent for your business, and they may want to work for OpenAI and not work for me. It's things like that. And so I know that, like personally, how hard it is to hire individuals. So, for example, right now we're looking for individuals, what we call in our growth marketing team. More people essentially working there, and I just cannot find really great people that can work really well in the PLG type of business. And I'm starting to think, so before you end up kind of wanting to hire somebody, I always say try and figure out whether you could hire an agency, even though an agency is more expensive potentially than hiring somebody into your team. What it allows you to do is plug in the agency pretty much immediately into the business, right? With a high competence level. They naturally also work with other businesses as an agency, right? So this is where I would say that's option 3. So option 1, off-the-shelf AI agent solution. Option 2, if that doesn't work. Option 2 is like N8N. Can we build a workflow to solve that pain for us? No. Then number 3 is definitely get an agency or consultant in place to plug that in and kind of because time is money. A lot of people don't think about the fact that you're gonna tinker like for weeks and months to hire the individual. You essentially lost X revenue, X pipeline, etc. Right? So definitely plugging in an agency and maybe multiple agencies to solve that problem fast. It's something you should be thinking of, especially if you're burning cash as a business. And then, yes, the last resort. I always say hiring a human is the last resort to your problem, not the first thing that you should be thinking about. So yeah.
That's a very non-traditional way of thinking about things. I can imagine a lot of businesses that would listen to that and be horrified by the prospects of, first of all, letting so many things flow through a software. A lot of businesses still do it old school. They still have like factories, for example, that are run on machinery that has been built in the 80s, and they know their customers face to face, and they've been doing business with their customers for like 20 years. And, they're kind of their operational model and the business model is not that targeted. It's not that, I don't know, not that similar to your typical Silicon Valley high-tech business where it's growth at all costs. You need to optimize every facet of your business, and you need to grow, and you need to bring more revenue, bring more profit, and the the first one in the world and disrupt everything around you. A lot of like real businesses still work on very old school type of thinking of, okay, I have a business, I'm doing some value for my clients, and that's enough. What I need to do is to continue doing that, and that's it. And they, I would believe, think the other way around. First hire people, then maybe bring in some agency that will help us do some specific thing somewhere, somehow. Then maybe there is a solution out there that we can build a workflow around, minimizing the amount of software, but still maintaining our human capital as much as possible. Because for the same reasons that you've described, like we've been at war for like 30 years, or some companies 100 years, to cultivate this particular mindset of a workforce that we have right now. And it's capital that we've accumulated, and we do not want to waste it by letting them go and letting them hit the job market so that our competitors can get to them. We want to maintain them, we want to save them. So any workflow that we're going to build is going to use our people that are currently there, and that's kind of the baseline of any given workflow. And only then, if nothing works, we may consider complete disruption through like AI agents and stuff. So sorry for the long rant. What do you think? Do those types of businesses, do they still have a place in our world today, or in our world like 10, 15, 20 years from now? Or is it an old mindset that is just getting phased out little by little?
My take is that it doesn't matter what type of business you are, you're an offline business, online business, etc. You have to have this what I would describe American mindset of you need to be always ahead of the game of your competition, because you need to figure out ways of how to improve your margin game, how to minimize headcount is part of improving your margin gain, etc. Because if you're not going to do that, your competitors will, right? And if you always think of it in this way, if I'm not trying to be at the bleeding edge of having the best possible process in my business with the least possible bodies, etc., then my competitors will do that. So I'll take probably an example of something like Amazon, right? The reason why Amazon is so good at what they do versus the old school way of doing things is because Amazon decided to go hardcore into the world of automation, big data, etc. And that's why they're so successful. And my take is like, if you're not gonna try and reinvent yourself, then somebody, your competitors essentially probably are thinking about it, right? So there's a good reason why a lot of businesses go out of business.
Yeah.
Because they just have never changed. They just still keep doing the things the same way that they were doing because they're very comfortable. But this is where I would always caution the business. When you feel like you're very comfortable, I always say, watch your competitors. So I used to work at this company called SimilarWeb, and the job there was like everybody was watching the competitors. You definitely want to be watching the competitors, seeing what they're implementing, etc., right? And so on and so forth. And you always want to be sort of at least 2 steps ahead of your competition. Whether you're running a factory, whatever it is, you have a shop, and or chain of shops, etc. You always think about, how can I be a few steps ahead of the competition? What sort of technology or process, or it's always about reinventing yourself. And that's what our American friends do really well. But I think in this part of the world, we're still kind of behind. And you can kind of see that nothing, some sectors, nothing has changed over the last sort of 2-3 decades, really. And that's worrying, whereas, things like, US, China, etc., everything's like changing super fast because people want to be, really to be running like super efficiently. And because if we're not gonna change, as I said, the Americans and the Chinese that will come into Europe, they'll set up their factories, whatever, they will show us how it's done. Right? So and they have good chances of kind of coming in, spinning up factories, even bringing their employees from the US and China to kind of show a new way of doing things. And this is why you have a lot of these American companies like Google, Amazon, etc. They're coming in here, spinning up their bases here. It doesn't matter which part of Europe, and they are running the process and they're showing how it's done. This process has not been invented in Europe. It has been invented in the US or somewhere else in the world. I think what we're struggling still in this part of the world is not running what we call best in class process. And that's because a lot of people in this part of the world, right, in Europe, they're big believers in work-life balance. That success, it doesn't mean your career doesn't mean really success. Success means spending a lot of time with your family, etc. Right? So that's because we prioritize different things here in Europe versus our American friends. But that also means it has a negative impact on the economy from that standpoint. And you can see a lot of macro level data that Europe is lagging behind massively. So if we can't, so when you talk about, for example, AI agents again, AI agents is coming from, again, from the US and China. We have our wave of kind of AI and LLMs, and what's happening here is very, very, very tiny. And even though some people have ambition to change that, I think we're still struggling just generally from the ecosystem, maybe the support system of the government kind of enforcing this a lot more. I think this is still that huge struggle. And this is why, even though a lot of that is happening in the US, for normal business, it doesn't matter whether you're going to buy that AI agent or the workflow from an American company, a Chinese, whatever. What I urge everybody to do is think about the workflow, the process within the business, and trying to think about whether you're squeezing what I call the juices in terms of efficiencies. And if you're struggling to figure out what means efficient or not, just look at, just open up open up Google or ChatGPT or Perplexity, whatever that is, and search for how can you run a best in class business for your particular industry. And there'll be probably a bunch of examples in different parts of the world. And this is where you can take that inspiration of how to run your business a lot leaner and meaner. And as I said, AI agents is just a means to an end. But really what you are looking to do is to go full on automation and automate many, many parts of the business, because it is possible today, something that maybe was not even possible 5 years ago, right? So this kind of process of like trying to build a best-in-class in business is a review you should be doing once a year within your business, whether all the processes that you have in the business are fully optimized. Because as I said, you have to have this American mindset, because that your competition is out there, is watching you, right? And they're trying to beat you in a lot of different ways in terms of efficiency, etc. So you should always have this sort of mindset as a business as well, to always be best in class when it comes to efficiencies.
It's hard to argue with. Businesses in and of themselves are a unit of capitalism. And it exists in a society that says that you have to be better than the competition. It creates an environment where competition exists, and it puts you in competition with your competition. So you compete all the time. And even if you are in a position where you feel like you don't, you probably are very much so. You just don't even understand that. And in business schools, there are many examples where they talk about it, and it all comes down to just finding and maintaining that competitive advantage, basically. And it's basically, again, a very simple framework where, smart people, much smarter than me, have written books on, where they say that, okay, the market forces will push you down. They will try to strip you of your competitive advantage for numerous reasons. Because if you are competitive on the market, others will look up to you and they will see, I want a piece of that. I want to do that, but maybe I can do that even better than they are. So the market forces will push you basically down into a situation where you don't have a competitive advantage anymore. Little by little, a competition rises, your competitors poach people that know processes better than you do know your processes yourself, or they implement those AI chatbots or AI agents more effectively than you do, or earlier than you do, and so on and so forth. It's an endless stream of things. And in the end, you're stripped of your competitive advantage. That's just how things work. The only thing that you can do to combat that is to create new ones, to invest into innovation, into experimentation, into getting to a place where once you're stripped of your old competitive advantage, you have one more to replace it, or ideally 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many more you need to stay competitive on the market. And that's, I feel, that's kind of the secret to success in a business in the end. But yeah, there are many examples where businesses.
I mean, you talked about experimentation,
Yeah.
right? It's a big reason why many companies are super successful, is because they are in the mindset of trying to be better 1% every day, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get better 1% every day? Well, unless you're running some sort of an A/B test, or trying to change XYZ, implement something else and kind of compare side by side whether this is better or not, you're never going to become better. And I think this is where, again, most of the businesses in the world just don't experiment. So I'll give you one example. Let's say when you look at Google, Google.com. So it's a search engine. But I think for most of us, it looks like the same every single day. But trust me, Google's running thousands of tests on Google.com on a daily basis, just trying to move the pixel, just really of a button by so essentially they're trying to move button by 1 pixel to the right or to the left, etc., trying to figure out where they can make a few $1,000,000 more by moving a button slightly, somewhere else. And so this is the extreme, of what can be done. And that's because Google has a lot of traffic and Google can test very, very fast things. But even, for a smaller business, let's say like ours, we're trying to test something on a monthly basis. So on a monthly basis, we as a business have these monthly, what we call key items. Part of the key items, we need to ship something, we need to deliver something. And we have these 3 tabs in our Google Sheet. One is called what we call core product items that need to be shipped. Number 2 is what we call growth items, because growth will not come unless you invest. You literally hire people to provide what's called inputs into the funnel, right? And you have literally a list of inputs that has to happen in order for this business to grow. And tab number 3 that we're going to create next month is what we call integrations, right? So because our assumption is that we will become a lot more successful the more parties we integrate with in the market. But one thing that we do within the growth tab is we want to run a particular test to see if that works. So I'll mention to you again before this that one of the tests that we want to run is we want to write a book. And it feels odd for an AI agent company to be writing a book and putting it on Amazon, right? Why would you do that? Well, guess what? You also have to think about, when you are competing in the market, right? And you're writing, you're in the AI agent space. Of course, I could talk about it like nonstop, but then you have to think about like, where does your audience, how do they consume information? How do they learn about you? And I know that one of the things that salespeople do or founders do, they read books, right? They're trying to become leaner and meaner, as a business. Because many companies in the US already are doing that. You can see that the revenue per employee is massively increasing in the US. And there's a lot of charts that prove that. But how can we make more and more businesses to be kind of in a similar boat? So one of the things I want to talk about is sales. How can we reduce headcount in sales? So because I have these AI agents, and there isn't a proper book today on AI agents. So I'm thinking to myself, let me write a book on AI agents and put it on Amazon. And it's for us, it's an experiment. Some people call it a project, but for me, everything is an experiment, really. Like I want to run it. Yes, I want to allocate like 5 to 10K for this experiment. And I want to launch it. I want to see what is the result, etc. So writing a book is so there's a guy in the world called Nathan Latka. Nathan Latka is one of the godfathers of B2B SaaS. He specifically preaches, that you should build a company being a bootstrapped founder rather than getting a lot of VC money. But one of the things he says in one of his webinars, he runs these sort of monthly webinars with founders, is that you should do what's called monumental marketing. So there's essentially marketing assets that you should build to increase your authority in the space. And one of the things is writing a book. So I've never written a book. I don't really read books, but I get what he's saying, because if your audience is reading a lot of books out there, so salespeople are, then you should definitely write a book, which would massively increase the authority. Plus, you can send that book to your key accounts. You can kind of do a lot of different things. So if you don't know how to write a book, you can use, for example, an AI agent, right? There's a lot of essentially solutions out there. But I've decided to go down what we call the human path. I always talk about these 2 paths in the business. Are we going down the human path or the AI agent path, or are we using both, right? 3 options that you have when it comes to modus operandi. And here, exactly. So I have a pain point. I want to write a book. I get why I need to write a book. Yes, I want to increase my authority. And then do I want to use an AI agent or do I want to use a human? And both of them have its drawbacks and upsides, right? So, but I decided, okay, I really found a ghostwriter that can actually do that. So that means I'm going to do a bunch of interviews with that individual based on particular, topics that I want to cover within the book. I want to write a 100-page book and I want to publish that, right? And if you can find a ghostwriter that can actually do that, just do it, And the way that I've done that is I've looked at other very successful book people essentially that publish books on tech sales essentially, and I literally just asked them, "Hey, could you maybe refer me a ghostwriter?" And that's it. And that's how I found a ghostwriter. Now, if I didn't find that ghostwriter, so a human that would be really good, so where I could make a bet that this human is going to write a really good book, I would most likely go down the AI agent route, where there are solutions in the market where you can literally write a book in like a week, using this sort of piece of software where you can just dump a lot of your thoughts and it will literally write a book for you to be published on Amazon. So that's an example where you're sort of and I think in the future we'll be more and more at the crossroads of like, we have this pain, we need to execute, and which path do we want to go in the human path, AI agent path, or we can actually use both to maximize the quality, for example, right, or the speed, or whatever that is, right? You want to try to optimize. I think we're going to see more and more of that in different parts of the business.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very, very good example. Very an obvious example, I'm going to be honest. Like writing a book nowadays may seem at least counterproductive, but I do believe that for the right audience that actually consumes the type of content with the right content, it can work. That fundamental marketing, like you mentioned, it definitely is worth investing in for any business, honestly, because out of all of the forces that we've talked about, both global and local, one is very true that the one unit of our attention is just being fought over by everybody. Your Netflixes, your Googles, your governments, your local bakery, whatever. Everybody wants that piece, and you only have so much. So then it becomes a question of how do you get there more effectively? Like very simply, that's what the whole sales and marketing processes today work towards. How do we get that one piece of attention from our potential customer at the right moment, ideally? Like we mentioned in the beginning, right? A lot of sales fail because you're just not at the right time or not in the right person. But if you're there and if you get that, then you can do something good for both parties. It's not just about pushing something that people do not need. That's not the goal of sales. I think that's never has been, at least for a healthy sales process. And
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, on that sort of front, like most of our ideal customer profile businesses, they sit in LinkedIn, for example, right?
Yeah.
So on LinkedIn, I'm trying to figure out ways how I call that LinkedIn feed domination strategy. How can I dominate the feed and the minds of my potential current customers and the future customers, right? What is the sort of content that I can sort of drip feed over a period of many years? We're not talking about a day,
Oh, yeah.
but something where you have consistently on a daily basis, you provide content that's of high value, and a high value, everybody will perceive it differently, right? So what is high value, what is not high value? But again, this is where you should be what they call experimenting, right? So experimenting. So I would post this type of content. I want to see what's the engagement is with that type of content. I'm going to post this type of content. I want to see what's the engagement there. So I'm going to give you, for example, a learning that I realized from LinkedIn. So when in the post, the post is about me, I get less engagement than talking about me plus my colleagues. So then I realized that the more I'm going to talk about me plus my colleagues, so essentially it could be all three co-founders, we're talking about them, or my whole team, the engagement massively skyrockets because of that. So engagement massively skyrockets, and that's just one variable that you can optimize. And this is where you have to be sort of testing kind of bit by bit different sort of variables to try and figure out what is that your audience is likes more to receive, right? So and to do that, you need to be posting literally daily, Monday to Friday, once a day, sometimes 2 a day. And you definitely so how do you justify, for example, that sort of spend? Because this is only the human path, right? I don't believe an AI agent can do that like really successfully. Not today, at least. Maybe in the future, yes. Because we're already seeing from Y Combinator batches that there are companies that build these what's called avatars, which are essentially fake personas, essentially that are spun up by AI agents. Essentially, it's a video that you're watching and you think it's a real human, but it's not a real human actually. It's a fake person, but it looks so real. Because essentially this year we're going through this phase, what we ought to call the video phase. So there was text phase. So where text became like really good from an AI standpoint, then voice became really good last year, and this year was all going to be about video. So essentially, we're going to look at content on the web. We may look at people like Obama or a bunch of other people where we will not understand whether it's a real video or not. I think that's the world we're going into.
Sounds horrifying, but please continue.
But yeah, so the technology is massively evolving. And when I was talking about the feed, dominating the feed, is so it's really figuring out how can we be more in front of our customers, right? But to do that, I always say you need to be doing what's called edutainment. So you need to educate your customer about something. It could be a pain point. It could be part of your founder journey. So I'm essentially sharing a bit of my journey, right, as a founder, and I put that on LinkedIn, right, so to inspire also other people to start companies, or figure out ways of how to grow a company, how to think about particular problems, how to write emails, a bunch of other things. So it's something that you should be, as I said, should be testing on a daily basis. But you should also figure out ways to unlock other individuals in your company, right? Because it's not just about the founder brand, but it's also how do you make the rest of your team do that, and kind of, as in, kind of be more visible on LinkedIn, because you really need to create this sort of little army of influencers, in-house influencers, right, that you have, which amplifies, and then you're on LinkedIn. And yeah, that unfortunately, all of that can be only achieved through what I would describe the human path. I think in the future, AI agents can kind of definitely can propose content that could maybe trend better on LinkedIn, a particular type of content, a post. So we're seeing a lot more of that, where essentially there's a lot more of a blend coming.
Yeah.
So for example, head of YouTube, so I have literally one person who literally does YouTube videos on a daily basis. He has built this little tool, I believe it was yesterday, which essentially figures out, okay, we have this asset, let's say YouTube video, how can we package it in a way on LinkedIn so that we get more likes? And that's what the AI agent tries to figure out. What is it that we need to include in the post? Who do we need to tag? Which companies? And what should be the thumbnail, etc., to maximize the monetization? This is where we're already seeing that sort of agentic capabilities come into play, trying to figure out, the best output, which means engagement, right, based on the input. So we're definitely seeing more of that as we progress. So that's just kind of another realm, right? The realm of kind of social media and using AI agents there.
Yeah. That's a very interesting example. I would love to see where your path takes you in about a year or two from now. How much of it is going to be AI, how many people you have left, and what's the speed of your growth. But thanks, Frank. Thanks for giving us a bit of an insight into agentic AI and to how you scale and run your business. I feel it is very, very useful to a lot of companies out there, and a lot of business owners and a lot of managers that are listening right now. So thank you very much. Where do people find you? Where do you post on LinkedIn? Where's your YouTube channel? Where there are so many places. So where to find you?
I always say it's important to be accessible, as a company, as a founding team. So yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Frank Sondors, the guy with the bacon emoji. If somebody doesn't know what bacon means, you can just chat GPT it. What does bacon mean in sales? And then we have a YouTube channel called Salesforge. You can learn more on there. All things have to do with how to write emails and what to use, blah blah blah. And these are the typical places. Of course, we have a website, salesforge.ai. You can check it out what we do. But
and the ebook soon.
And a book, yes. Something on the ISDRs and how to use them in tandem with your sales team. Something along those lines.
So many places. Thanks, Frank. And thank you all for listening to us talk about AI in business today. If you liked what you've heard today, share the video with your friends or with founders of your company. Like and comment on what you didn't like about the video. Engage with the algorithm. It likes that. Everything that we've talked about, it works on this video as well. And if you have ideas what you want us to talk about next, always let us know. Good luck on your business journeys, and see you next time. Bye-bye.